I'm Jonty Pearce. I'm editor of Call Centre Helper, and today's webinar, a fascinating title, How to Transform Your Customer Experience Within Your Current Budget. And I think that's going to be quite an interesting subject for everyone. Delighted today on the agenda to be joined by Peter Massey from Bud. I've known Peter for a large number of years, and he came number 8 in our survey of the most respected people in the contact center world. So Peter's going to talk us through transforming your customer experience within your current budget. Also delighted to be in the same room as Tim Pickard from NewVoiceMedia, and Tim's going to be taking us through three ways that technology can improve the overall customer experience. We're going to have top tips from the audience and interactive questions and answers. So we aim to make this as interactive as possible, and if you want to put any comments, questions at any point into the question box, we'd be delighted to do that. I'm going to start off, which is, does it cost more or less to give a good customer experience? The answers are, it costs a lot more, it costs more to give a good customer experience, it costs about the same, it costs less, or it costs a lot less. Peter, this is a poll that you were interested in doing. Have you got a guess for which one you think is going to come out?
Ooh, I don't know. Bell curve?
What are you saying about the middle?
Let's have a look.
I'm just going to share the results with everyone now, and we'll just see what comes up there. I would think it would cost more, personally. But here's the results. 9% says it costs a lot more, 34% says it costs more, 32% about the same, 20% it costs less, 5% it costs a lot less. So that's a bell curve, but weighted towards the top end. Is that unusual, would you say?
I'd say that's unusual. Normally, when I've done these exercises before, it splits, actually. You don't get a bell curve. You get a lot of people who believe it costs a lot more and a lot of people who believe it costs a lot less. What's interesting is that in our work over the last 10 years, putting in the Amazon approach, we generally take out about 80% of the cost by improving the customer experience up to top levels. So a great example of that is something like DRL Appliances Online, who won European Call Centre of the Year. They took about 50% of their cost out, this is cost per transaction, out in the space of a year. And they are one of the leaders in terms of customer experience. So I think there's an interesting challenge there for people to start to think about why do we presume that it costs a lot more to give good service.
Well, so hopefully all those people who thinks it costs more, and they've got obviously a current budget in mind, Peter, hopefully you'll be able to give a few pointers on how they can transform customer service within existing budget constraints.
Indeed. Okay, well what I'll do, I'll put my my machine onto full screen, and here we go. There we go. So you've got that okay, have you, Jonty?
We have indeed.
Great. Okay, so just a little bit of background. I mentioned there about Amazon and this book, The Best Service is No Service, which in fact doesn't mean you shouldn't give good service, but it means that a lot of service is actually created by the policies and procedures that we operate by, and by confusing our customers. And so, you know, it's not often that anybody gets out of bed in the morning thinking, great, I'm going to ring a few call centres today and sort my electricity bill out, or sort my phone out, or so on and so forth. So most people would rather not go to the effort. So my colleague Bill Price, and who lives in Seattle, Dave Jaffe, who lives in Melbourne, wrote this book about 4 years ago now, based predominantly around the experiences Bill had running Amazon's customer experience worldwide. And as I say, that result has been replicated time and time again. We would typically target about 80% of the contact that comes into a contact center as being avoidable. And I'll show you some infographics later on to bring out how you might approach that. So obviously, work all over the UK, all over the world. In fact, these are UK customers, but lots that people will know. It's really 3 things I want to get across today. One is really about making useful what you've got already. In other words, there's a lot of information. Few of our contact centers lack information, but what can we do with that? thinking about the way in which we can get people to act, and thinking about the way we can put that across, so presenting the cost of not acting rather than the case for acting. It's quite an interesting thing about decision making, that if you can show people what the cost of not acting is, then sometimes you can get a lot further, and I'll illustrate how we can do that. And I think the third point is getting clear that the contact centres don't create the contact, and therefore it's difficult for them to stop it. It's fundamental that the role of contact centre director today is about reaching outwards rather than managing inwards. And yes, there are lots of roles that have to manage the way we handle contact, but the fundamental is about driving back into the organisation and showing that the intelligence that comes from the contact centre can help other people around the organisation stop the contact occurring. And I know Tim's going to talk a little bit about what CCA have been learning lately about that as we go on. So first point, no shortage of data. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen these bud cartoons, you get them off the website. This collection of data and great big heaps of data that lie all over the organisation is very much the sort of cause of confusion for a lot of people in the business. They either ignore it because there's too much data, or they think that data is about how you handle contact rather than that data is about me in the rest of the organisation. And it causes confusion. It's difficult for somebody in marketing or in sales or in logistics to necessarily get a handle on what it is that they should be doing to help. So even if they are collaborative and want to help you, it can be difficult. And obviously, if they are confused, they'll probably just get on with what they're doing and try and optimize what they do in their area. But those other areas are often what cause the contact in the first place. So where we want to get to is being able to make clear requests of our colleagues of what we want them to do. And I'll let you pause and read the amusing little 5-year-old's request on there. But one's got to be very clear.
She hasn't obviously realised the significance of Whitsun holiday in that one.
Yes, it's probably a recent one. And where we want to get to as well is we want to get one set of actions from many sets of data. So the 3 cartoons are really meant to represent, if I'm in marketing, I've got a whole set of feedback data, of metrics. If I'm in sales, I've got a whole set. If I'm in logistics or stock, I've got a whole set. If I'm in the contact center, I've got a whole set of data. But those data are telling us probably the same things about customers. One of the things that's very evident as a customer is there is only one company and there's only one set of things that you're trying to do. But when you're inside the silos of the business, the data often conflicts, partly because different people own it and they look for different answers in the data, but fundamentally it's just the way we're organized. So the objective is to get that into a common set of data that allows you to work with your colleagues with one view of what the feedback is telling you, one view of what customers are telling you to do, and whether that's about removing frustrations or whether it's about picking up ideas for improvement, is then being able to agree one set of priorities. And then it's much easier to get the money behind the big ideas, the things that make the big differences, rather than sprinkling lots of ideas in lots of places. And as we go around, some of the very best businesses in the world, what you see all the time is that the prioritization process for what they are going to address is both rich in data, it's very focused, it's cross-functional, and it works very, very quickly. So in an Amazon, you're turning that cycle every week. In a lot of organizations, you'd be lucky to turn that cycle every quarter. So for the prioritization of the spend of money and the use of people's time is very critical to that. I think what we also see very clearly is that some of the things that can be done to improve customer experience are down to an individual department, the mine, if you like, here. Sometimes it belongs to another part of the organization, so you're trying to help another part of the organization fix something. And quite often, it's a common policy that may be causing something to occur. So the way that we bill our customers, the way that we send statements out, can be something that's quite a significant change, but has a knock-on effect all over the place. And the point of all this is that removal of this customer effort by systematically looking at the data is what leads you to these 80% reductions in contact, and enables you then to be doing an awful lot more with less funds or with the same funds, depending on where you choose to take the money. So we call this process of prioritization decision flow, and Jonty, you've got there a little video, or part of a little video that we've made to sort of explain this decision flow of how the data comes through an organization and leads to people making the right prioritization decisions. Do you want to click on that?
Okay, I will do indeed.
Legendary companies are built on amazing customer experiences. But what are amazing customer experiences built on? We believe the key is decision flow, the specific way the customer is built into your decision making. So here's our point of view. Decision making is often inaccessible and disconnected from what customers and frontline staff know. Decision making can be overwhelmed with masses of data from many different sources, different media, different owners, different conclusions. Common sense gets lost in this maze of data, and customers and frontline staff can't be heard. Things aren't joined up to what customers say, and decision-making goes undesigned. There's none of the flow or rhythm you feel when business is brilliant. It's meetings, 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 with no time to move things on. Meanwhile, the wave of unhappy customers grows and grows, even though we all want to be part of an agile company that's really going places.
Thanks, Jonty. So it sort of explains the background to what we're looking at there, and if you want to have a look at the longer version of that video, you can see it on our website. So I'll just bring back the slides on here. So let's have a look at then the sort of presentation of data. We're not going to cover off the whole of the best services, no service approach, but I want to look at a couple of key success factors around presenting the cost of not acting. So first of all, the presentation aspect of it, and then we'll go into how we can present data or move things on. So just want to introduce, and a lot of people will have heard this phrase, infographics or information graphics. It's a little known fact that Florence Nightingale was a statistician, and these diagrams, these rose diagrams, for which she's equally famous in certain circles as her medical career, are about presenting data to MPs in Parliament to put forward the case for medical care and funding in the Crimean War. And in fact, what they show is that the blue areas, as they go over the season, as you go around the circle, the blue areas are the deaths from preventable disease, the red from wounds from battle, and black other causes. And then what you can see is the blue areas in the right-hand diagram are very significantly larger. And as we go into the year after, which is the rose diagram on the left, those areas are being cut down as people are getting better treatment. And one of her claims to fame in India is actually she took the mortality rate for Indian soldiers down from 69 per thousand to 18 per thousand over a period of 10 years, using this kind of statistical data to improve things. Reminds one of sort of Dave Brailsford in the British Olympic cycling team and his constant reduction of every small item they can address. And to a high degree, that's what happens in businesses. Is one needs to be very clear what it is you're trying to reduce and how to go about it. So this is a different infographic.
I would certainly be interested to know if anyone in the audience has been using infographics in their contact center to help improve the customer experience.
So value irritant grid, this is one of the infographics we use, and it's very simple, but it's multidimensional. It's got a number of aspects to it. So the y-axis, the vertical axis, is the company, and across the x-axis, the customer. And it's called value irritant because each of the quadrants represents an area of value, which has been, people sat down and decided that certain types of contact have got value to both the customer and the company. So in the top right-hand corner, where you can see leverage opportunity, you can see card is lost or stolen. This business has decided that at that point in time, people really do want to talk to us. It's the most effective way of dealing with it. It's an emotional part of what happens, and it's a critical point in people churning. So, it's been allocated into that area where we really want people to talk. If we go into the bottom left corner where the eliminate quadrant is, these are things which are annoying customers and annoying the company. They're causing work that's unnecessary. And the obvious thing to do there is eliminate them completely. And in fact, what happens in a lot of businesses is people start trying to automate these things rather than eliminating them at root cause. So it's quite important to get clear with your peer group and with your colleagues what is your strategy for some of these types of contact. And you'll notice all these types of contact are in the customer's words. It's about using the customer language and really understanding what they're looking for. The other two quadrants are interesting because they often get confused. It's quite important to make sure that the customer is going to get something of value to them if you're going to bother to automate something. Hence, the right-hand corner on the bottom is automation, but the top left-hand corner is about simplifying things. People won't put a lot of work into automation if it's not something that adds any value to them. But it's very common, for example, in regulatory requirements to have to put things out. So the company has to value it because it has to meet its regulatory requirements, but customers don't really want to know. And the simplification is absolutely critical in those situations. So you can see pretty quickly this business, you can see very quickly with this data that something like 24%, 24.3% of the contact could be eliminated. Now, if you've got a contact budget of 10 million quid or 1 million pounds, that represents a big sum of money that could be removed. Now, you don't necessarily have to save the money. What you can then do is move that time and effort into leveraging the opportunity, i.e. spending more time with people where there is value and value for both parties, or getting that funding into automation for the 30% of contact that could also be moved to automation and not require people. So you can see very quickly, a picture, and this allows the management to make a decision on what way are we going, how can we get to this point where we can give a fantastic customer experience by removing the customer effort, but doing it within the budget that we have already, and seeing how we get there.
And Steve has written in to said that he uses the value irritant grid to make informed decisions and more importantly, to help prioritize projects.
Absolutely. No, it's very simple but very focused. It takes a little bit of getting to, but it's fantastically useful. So let's have a look at the other point about this, is that we've got to engage with the rest of the business. So I don't know about you, but if you work in a call centre, then it often feels a little bit like this. You're the bloke digging the hole, and everybody else is telling you what to do. And one of the things that we really want to try and get to is a situation where we can turn that on its head. And as one client said to me one time when they'd adopted this approach, they used to go into their management meetings on a Monday and people would say, okay, what's up with the contact centre? Are we meeting the SLAs? You've got all the problems. And she started to turn that around and say, no, actually, the call centre's fine. I've got my manning levels right. The phones are ringing. It's fine. But actually, the chap in logistics has got a problem because his shipper's letting him down. The product development guy's got a problem because that product he's just launched doesn't work. The customers are telling us so, and it's actually about shifting this mindset. So the issue here is, we don't create the contact in the call centre, and we can't therefore stop it. So the question really, the really crunch question here is who did create the contact and who can therefore stop it? And can we get them on the hook? Maybe not to bite the head off as the Hannibal Lecter picture puts in there. Maybe one's got to be a bit more subtle about it. But again, how can we use an infographic to do that? And I'm going to show you just a couple of infographics before we finish, which can help you do this. And it's something you may want to follow up again online with some of the examples in the white papers on our site. But this is an infographic that looks at the vertical axis. It looks at the contact rate across the horizontal axis. It's looking at the reasons why somebody's been in touch. This example is a utility. So I've been overcharged, I have no supply, I'd like to give you a meter reading. And what you're seeing is a sort of 6-week pattern running down. If I take this third column here, I'd like to give you a meter reading. How can we reduce that demand, which is customer effort and its cost to us to handle? And then there are a couple of very cunning things at the top. One is the relative cost of handling that type of contact, and that's not just the contact itself, but it's the resolution behind it. and the director or project manager, the lead person who is responsible for taking that down. And this is about being able to say, can we get clear who owns the root cause of the problem, who is it that can take this contact down, rather than saying it's down to the contact center to handle it. So it's quite a complex graphic, one you might want to consider afterwards. This is another example for sales, sales revenue. Similar situation. So what you're looking at is a typical buyer flow. You know, if 100% of the population could buy, who's browsing, who's shopping, who's buying, who's live, who can buy it again. And there are lots of reasons in the second line here that show why people can't buy, what stops them buying. And then if you start to quantify that in this waterfall at the bottom, you can start to see where the water's falling out of the leaky bucket, and you can see what percentage of sales that is. Now, if you turn that into financial sums, you can start to see the size of the leakage, because quite often we're taking a very small percentage of the income that we could be taking. And if you then assign ownership to each step in the waterfall, you can then start to work with colleagues across the piece as to how that can work well. This is particularly useful when you start to link marketing and sales together. Something I've implemented in a business where I'm a non-exec, and in fact they won a Chartered Institute of Marketing National Award yesterday for just implementing a very simple process like this, which has been incredibly useful to them. So we've covered off the areas there, Jonty, making use of what you've got already. So you have a lot of data, but how can you present it better? How can you present the cost of not acting? And how can you get that ownership into the rest of the organization using some of this best services, no service approach? And this approach is so much stronger than letting the financial guys come after you to sharpen the pencils or, you know, cut the stationery bill. Cutting cost by cutting cost does not fundamentally remove the work that a customer's got to do and that you've got to do. It just makes it worse. And I, tongue-in-cheek, put down the bottom here, Scott Forstall or John Browett, the two guys that got sacked from Apple last week. John Browett was the ex-head of Dixon's, and he went after making the retail experience more efficient, cutting some of the hours and so forth. Really wasn't the right attitude, the right place to go. So that's all I want to cover. Jonty, can I hand back to you?
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Peter. We're just going to run through another poll now, which is what is stopping you from improving the overall customer experience? I'm just going to launch that up. The answers are lack of resources, we're too busy, lack of budget, lack of buy-in from senior management, cross-functional buy-in, or conflicting priorities. Now you can vote on more than one of these, so if you find, say, 3 of them apply, just click on those on those 3, and we'll get a view on that. It's take you a little while just to get the answers in, so we'll just give you a couple of minutes. It looks like we're going to have three main favourites coming up here, and you know, so before I did this, I thought lack of resources would probably be one of them, one of the answers coming up here. Just going to close off just wait 2 seconds for the last couple of people to vote, and just share the results here. So what we've got, and is quite interesting, top of the list there becomes conflicting priorities. Lack of resources is there. Peter, I don't see lack of buy-in from senior management on here. That's perhaps a little surprise.
No, I'm not surprised about that, because I think most organisations and a lot of the big industries are represented in your audience today. The senior management now gets that customer experience is really important. The issue is not whether you want to give a good customer experience. It goes back to that. Do you believe you can afford to? And it goes back to execution. It goes back to how do you do it in that way. And so senior management, I think, is putting a lot of pressure on to say, let's get the customer experience to be a lot better.
Yeah, there was a Gartner report recently that talked about CEO priorities, and customer experience is #1 now.
Wonderful. And now we're going to go to an audience question. What is the biggest thing that's holding you back from improving the customer experience? So if you'd like to put in your situation, what you find is the biggest thing that is holding you back, if you'd like to put that into the question box now. So just seeing a number of answers coming through here. What we've got is a sort of range of different answers here. Jason says there's not enough hours in the week. I sometimes wish there would be a few more, Tim. I guess that's a challenge for a lot of people.
Theme.
Kyprios has said lack of time. Raoul has said conflicting priorities. And this is quite an interesting one. Knowledge of where to start and budget.
Not enough IT resource I can see there.
Yeah, engagement of other functions, lack of money, no resources. Everyone not working as one, too many cottage industries. Peter, I guess you alluded to that with your man digging up the hole.
Yes.
Senior managers don't view across the whole organisation, a lack of push to change in each area from the top to implement required changes, says Rianne. Conflicting priorities and resource availability. So many projects to complete with too little time to complete them.
Yeah, it's what we call it's raining projects. And it is very common when one's not got a systematic approach to what's going on. These are all symptoms of the way the organisation runs today, if you like. People are incentivized to deliver on their bit of the business, and that changes over time. And interesting, I got a question from a colleague in Germany yesterday just about the number of people in the UK, the number of organisations that have somebody called a chief customer officer, or somebody who operates as a chief customer officer. And the nature of a chief customer officer is somebody who pulls together across the organisational silos the initiatives that need to take place to help the customer get what they need and get the right kind of journeys running. And we really struggled to sort of quantify it. Very few people have that title, but now organisations fall into two categories. Those that are trying to get cross-functional working to come together, that are trying to understand how to do it, and those who now, very few, but maybe 5% of organisations, where they already have high levels of collaboration. What's particularly interesting, though, is a lot of the tech startups that we see working in London, a lot of the tech startups start very much from a customer-centric point of view and don't have the organisational problem. They just start in a different place, in the way that Amazon did. It's the same thing again.
Yeah, and certainly that rest of the organisation, Stephen said, commercial and marketing activities feeding in timely data and resource functions. So sometimes it's because of timelines and market sensitivity, but I guess not all the time. Saidi has said, should it be done by the sales team or the customer service team? And I guess it's, to some extent, coordinating both of those. Tim, Boris has said, really, it's a lack of budget. I could say it's a lack of resources, small number of field technicians and so on. So we on technical support get numbers, and he's talking thousands of calls or more, and then that starts the whole diplomacy project. I guess that's quite a challenge to build those bridges.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think being joined up is and Peter's talked about this, I think, and I'm going to talk about this. I think that's one of the kind of the key elements here. So that kind of one agenda that we're going to come on and talk about when I do my piece.
Well, we're just almost on to that now. Just before we do that, Dave has said, I love the value irritant grid. What a great way to visualize the issues. It's obvious now, I see it. So if anyone wants to get a copy of that, if you want to download the slides, which we'll be putting up on the website after this call. So just want to hand across now to Tim Pickard from NewVoiceMedia. Tim is going to be talking through 3 ways in which technology can improve the overall customer experience. Tim, across to you.
Thanks, Jonty. So good afternoon, everybody. Before I do that, I just wanted to share some information I picked up yesterday at the Customer Contact Association conference in Glasgow, talking about 5 things to focus on for good customer experience. So very relevant to our discussion today. 1, better understanding of the customer situation. 2, enterprise-wide ownership of customer, so aligning to what we've been talking about. 3, experts on hand when required for complexity, specialist knowledge workers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. 4, correct blend of self-service versus conversation to reflect the brand. Yeah. Again, that's an interesting one which we can talk a little bit about. And continuous effort to reduce silos. So I thought those were really interesting because they had come from work that the Customer Contact Association had done, and they really reflect a lot of the conversation that we've had today and that we were planning for today. So very much in sync with that.
I think it does very much tie up to that.
So let me quickly talk a little bit about NewVoiceMedia for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are a cloud-based contact center provider. We launched our platform in 2006. We now have something over 150 customers, 300 call centers around the world, and actually somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 agents at any one time using our service. All of our technology was developed in-house by ourselves, and that's very important because it allows us to manage our own roadmap. It allows us to make regular feature enhancements, which is one of the benefits of cloud. But it also gives us the confidence in our service that we can host a trust site, what we call a trust site, which shows an availability of the service because we guarantee availability at 5 nines. So we demonstrate that in real time, and it's publicly available at newvoicemedia.com/trust. And we have now completed around 6 million real-time tests to demonstrate that high availability. As you can see from the logos, we have some great customers. We are acquiring customers at a faster and faster rate, from the large organisations like Parcel Force and Royal Mail to smaller organisations. And I have to say that SHL, we picked up an award last night with SHL for the best technology partnership. So thanks to them for all of their hard work. So a little bit about cloud. We talk about true cloud, and there are some important differentiators around cloud-based offerings. And some people may have heard the term cloud washing for vendors who are just putting a little bit of paint on the otherwise known as on-premise services.
I've not heard that one before.
Write that one down. So single instance platform. Everybody has access to the same application. When we make upgrades, everybody has availability of those new features. It's, as I mentioned, developed and managed by NewVoiceMedia, which means we have no dependency on an upstream vendor of any type. There is no hardware required and there is no software to download. So it's very fast time to implement and to benefit. The features you can see sort of graphically there: call distribution, IVR, call recording, all of the things that you would normally expect from a fully featured contact center environment. All that we need to deliver the service is a terminating number and an internet connection. So, as I say, very easy to implement, very fast time to benefit, which, as we're talking about budgeting, is obviously very important. Not just the cost, but also the time to benefit. And one last point on that slide, which is about the cloud-to-cloud integration with Salesforce, which is very significant for us because it helps us to combine those cross-functional elements as we go through the customer experience. So part of the problem as we define it is that voice is something of a forgotten channel. If you think about the level of personalization that you would get when you go to a popular website like Amazon, for example, you're recognized, your buying behavior is known. Amazon will treat you differently to other visitors to the site. So you're suggesting books, it's suggesting things you might want to do, buy And that might be based on the value of your spend, or it might be based on status with an organization. But there is that recognition and understanding that the service that you're going to get is personalized, and we've become very accustomed to that. We believe that we can deliver that same level of personalization through the voice channel, and that through using cloud services like our own, that we can deliver that type of service. And the other point I would make here is that with the volume of information available on the internet, self-service is allowing callers to be much better informed. What that means is that they're not going to ring you if they can find the answer from a forum, from a web chat potentially, from another customer. So those types of questions you're probably not going to get now. So what you are going to get is the more detailed and more complex environments, and that's why I think that point that was made at the CCA was so important about specialist knowledge workers for those more complex environments that we need to start to resolve. And lastly, about the customer experience, it's hard to copy. It's a differentiator that is difficult for your competitors to copy from you. So as your customers become to realize and trust in that higher level of service that they're going to get, then they show that with the value of the brand, and that is why customer experience is the highest priority of CEOs. So voice is still the channel. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but 80 to 90% of global consumers prefer to use the phone. Phone traffic represents 80% of all inbound traffic in UK and US call centres. As I've just described, voice is an incredibly important channel, and it's an opportunity to talk to customers and build that relationship with them. And as they are potentially dialing you less with more complex problems, that's a perfect opportunity if you can get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So, managing customer experience on a budget or within budget. 3 ways that technology can help. One agenda across the business where customers interact. Unsilo your business information. So we talked a little bit about that. Delivering a common view of the customer across functional areas. And I think that's critically important, as we've seen. But also, it's that common understanding of how the business wants to operate in terms of product quality. When do we put a product out into the field? If we do that too early, we know we're going to get problems at the back end. So there's this whole ethos, I suppose, around how the business wants to operate, and that's important to get right across all of those functional areas. Gathering data, using multiple sources to understand customers better, and we'll come on and talk a little bit about that. And unsurprisingly, from me, move to the cloud as one way that organizations can quite quickly start to benefit from managing their budgets better. So why is understanding the customer so important? Well, it's very easy to create bad feeling or drive a wedge between yourself and your customer. So on this slide, an infographic, Peter, 84% of people would walk away from a company that doesn't listen. Examples of not listening: trying to sell a product or service that the customer already has refused, trying to make contact in ways that they have expressly asked you not to. There is a converse to this in terms of how you manage that, which we'll come on to in another slide. So the one agenda side of this, join up your customer experience across the major touch points, so marketing, sales and service. And I think technology helps us here by combining telephony with CRM. So you can understand that from a marketing point of view, so being able to bottom out with great clarity and objectivity the number of calls you're making, who you're making them to, what the responses are, call recordings across all of that, and then having that available to the rest of the business. We have found, by working with a number of our customers, we have highlighted Massey here as an example of that, who started using our technology in their help desks around the world to create a follow-the-sun help desk support. They then used and implemented the technology in the sales and marketing organization for outbound and have tied those things together using Salesforce as their CRM, and implementing case-based routing as well as a kind of a unique feature that they've worked with. So customers want you to know and understand them. They expect organizations to know who they are up front, and that may be through CLI, it may be through a policy number, an order number, or customer reference. They then want to be treated according to their customer histories. They want to recognize them, and they want to know that they're going to be treated because they've identified themselves. So not have to talk through their case 4 or 5 times, not have to talk through their buying history. That should be known to the organization that they're calling. So the next question is how. Well, there are lots of ways to collect information. That may be buying behavior that we can collect in a CRM application. It may be called caller history. It may be social media or other public sites. It could be subscription data services like Expedia. It could be post-call surveys, so the customers themselves could be creating that history for you. And all of that together provides a really rich view of the customer and many clues as to how you might want to manage that call. So a couple of examples. If this customer is in your top 10% of customers, and the Pareto analysis, that may provide 60–70% of your revenues, you may want to handle that call in a specialist way. If somebody has called the help desk 4 times after purchasing something new in the last 24 hours, then you may think, right, you've got a problem. We're going to manage that call differently. But I think the important thing here is also telling the customer that you've recognized their problem and you're going to manage the call differently. So an IVR that says, we recognize that you're having difficulties because you've called us multiple times. We're going to route you through to our specialist team who can help you.
I mean, it's certainly very frustrating when you call a call center and every time you start from sort of kind of ground zero again, and you're explaining the problem to the same people. Telecoms seem particularly bad on this, where you've got a complex problem. Just to be able to put that through to the same person or give the option.
So exactly right, and we have examples of customers who do that. Lumes, that I mentioned earlier on, identify a case. Would you like to talk to the same person that you were talking to before, or get put through to the first available agent? I mean, it's quite simple, but customers really appreciate that because particularly in more complex environments, they don't want to have to go through the whole explanation all over again. So my final slide is around managing that budget. So the cloud benefits, there's no capital costs to pay. You have complete visibility over the costs that you're going to incur because you're managing on a per user per month basis, and that can obviously scale up and down depending on seasonality, for example. So at Christmas time, if you're in a retail environment, that may scale up. We have a customer who goes through clearing. Obviously, that for universities that scales up dramatically during a 2 to 3 week period and scales back down again. So managing those costs, not having to buy equipment for your peak loading, and scaling those costs up and down also is very helpful. Complementing existing technology, you don't have to throw everything out to be able to adopt cloud technologies. They can overlay or have a dual strategy around that. It's technically capable without being taxing. I think that kind of sums up a lot of what cloud offers. In terms of some of the commentary that we had earlier on, we never get the time, too scarce IT resources, those types of comments. Cloud will help you in those environments, and you get DR thrown in pretty much for free. So if your building is unavailable for whatever reason, and we had customers who had this over the summer with the Olympics, they can essentially set up their agents to work from home at very short notice, in an hour to a couple of hours, it's very seamless. First rate exchange, good example of using that technology, as Mark O'Doherty points out in his quote there.
And certainly things like the cloud, we're seeing statistics now in the latest Contact Babel survey showed that 38% of contact centers are now using the cloud in at least some part of their operation. So that's accelerated dramatically over the last 2 years.
And we find that in terms of how people adopt cloud services. So they may adopt it in one part of their business, get comfortable, understand how this can help them, understand how they can deploy it, become trusting in what cloud services can deliver, and then it spreads across the business, both functionally and into other contact center environments.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Tim. Certainly some food for thought there on some of the ways we can use technology to improve the overall customer experience. We're just going to do a quick poll now. What things have you tried to improve the overall customer experience? Again, multiple votes on there. Have you tried fixing broken processes, shortening queue times, tried engaging your agents, changing metrics, adding additional channels? If you just want to add in some of the things you're doing, again, you can vote on multiple ones of them here. If there's something you've tried that isn't in this list, if you'd like to add that into the question box, and if you've got any tips, we'll also be doing tips. We've got a few tips in so far, so there's quite a good chance of winning a bottle of champagne. Just going to close off the results here, and we see that overall the two big ones are fixing broken processes and changing agent metrics. Just going to do another quick audience question, which is, in the past 12 months, what have you done that has worked best to improve customer experience? Because we know we're all trying to improve customer service. What have you found that's worked best? So if you'd like to put your answers into the question box now, would be good. And also, it's the time now where you have a chance to win a bottle of champagne. So if you'd like to put in your top tips to improve the overall customer experience. So we've got a couple of tips that have come up on the from our readers so far. Create an incentivized forum for customers to provide feedback on how they'd like to be served, and some of the actual feedback that comes on board, and what they can do about that. So, Peter, that's quite an interesting one. Is a forum for customers to provide feedback. Have you seen much of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously this overlaps strongly with social, in that there's a lot of feedback out there anyway. So depending on the nature of your business, you can do a lot of listening almost for free. Analytics in the social world are pretty free. So you can gather a lot of information. Sometimes people say it's a bit of a warped sample, but I don't think so. I think now there are so many people using so many different media that you can get a pretty good view that way. I think when it comes to incentivizing, it's quite interesting because obviously one of the famous cases is giffgaff. It's owned by O2, supplies SIMs, so mobile telephony. They found about 8 of the key influencers in these forums, brought them into the office, said, right, we're starting a business, how should we do it? And that business has grown really, really well, with all of the sales being done by customers, all the product development being done by customers, and all of the service being done by customers. So they have metrics like how many customers are online at the moment serving other customers, you know, and quite a very unusual model in a way, but it proves just what you can do. And certainly the tech industries, and over the last 12 months the telco industries, have really gone hard into this kind of discussion forum area, YouTube videos and so on and so forth. It's such a rich vein, which many people are you know, are just a little bit maybe either blind to because they've not seen it work themselves or not used one in their own life, or on the other side, some industries it's very hard to do. So utilities, for example, there aren't many geeks out there who really want to spend their time helping other customers. So it's a harder model there.
Yeah. Go one step beyond what your customer expects. Create a wow experience above the parity line that they will want to share. Happy customers are the best advertising you can buy. Certainly, happy customers doing the marketing is I think the new selling approach.
Absolutely, I think just having your customers as your best advocates and having them promote you. We all know how powerful that is, and I'm sure we've all had experiences of that. And obviously the flip side of that is people can obviously detract from your brand as well, which is something you want to try and avoid.
Pearce suggests that we invest in our people. We've had Steve has said taking agents through the customer journey helps them to explain transactions and processes in terms a customer use. And I think certainly jargon is often one of the challenges we face. For example, how many agents know how to use the company's own web self-service portals? They should know if they want to guide customers to use it. Certainly, I wonder how many people use the IVR systems that they use. Allow customers to contact you on multiple media channels. Tim, I guess that's music to your ears. Voice, email, web chat, SMS. We're seeing a big increase in web chat for the last couple of years. And responds consistently and sympathetically on the same channel.
Yeah, no, I think I would definitely agree with that. And there are more and more channels available, obviously, and customers will want to communicate with customers with companies in the way that suits them best.
Yeah, Pearce suggests investing in their knowledge. Nicholas says get out and visit the customers firsthand. Certainly, getting out of the contact centre could be very useful. And Steve said sharing direct feedback with agents and using it as part of a regular coaching program. And I guess. I guess, Peter, that sharing feedback, and I guess sharing feedback with the rest of the organisation could be quite an interesting one.
Absolutely, because there are a number of coaching type products that are available to collect scores, shall we say, direct from customers. So progressively, the scoring or the monitoring of an agent performance is being done by customers rather than by monitoring staff. Obviously, there's still some regulatory monitoring going on. But I think that there's been a big shift in that respect, perhaps to some degree a little bit too far sometimes. But it's interesting, actually. Jason on here has made the comment about asking the agents what the biggest issues are they have and analysing those and improving. I'm a great believer in that kind of. If you are prepared to listen to your staff, they talk to hundreds of customers in a week, and they know a lot of the problems that are there. And if you can then systemize that and get that into that decision flow, you can start prioritizing some of the issues they're bringing forward. So for nearly every organization we go into, there are staff all over the place who know what all the issues are. It's rare to find things that are new. It's really about trying to focus the attention on the biggest issues and being able to describe what big is based on all the different pieces of feedback that you're getting.
Yeah, and one I haven't got on the screen, Dave said, I've recently visited a number of call centres. Would say the biggest issue is that people are very good at finding workarounds. One of the problems is that many of the problems just get papered over and not addressed at course. Ashifa says holding agents accountable for their contribution to the customer's experience, intimating toll-free contact numbers. Certainly could help a bit in certain circumstances, though with more people on mobiles, that doesn't necessarily get into their minutes. Take time to understand good and bad experiences direct from the customer and develop processes and services accordingly. Don't assume you know that. I guess there's a danger that we all assume that we know that.
Well, I think that's true. I think taking that feedback, as you say, good and bad, but also looking at things like post-call surveys and building those into your processes. I mean, we can route on post-call survey results, for example. So if somebody's given you a bad post-call survey, we could route to our top tier of agents, for example, and change the customer experience that way.
Yeah, Dave has suggested asking agents and customers for ideas. That seems a common thing. The wisdom of crowds. I suppose it could be the wisdom of the cloud. Dazzle customers with kindness and put a smile in your voice. End every call with a "could I have done more" attitude. I think that's a really nice one. Peter, I particularly like that.
I think there is something about how you create agent engagement, which came up in one of the other contributions there, is how you create agent engagement and how you get that smile into the voice. And as I remember interviewing Kevin Newman, who was one of the formative MDs at First Direct, his measure of success was that every frontline member of staff in the last quarter of an hour of their shift was still dazzling customers in that kind of way. And it wasn't, I think quite a lot of this comes back to you can't extract customer experience from people experience. It's very, very important to be able to understand the impacts that you have on the way that you manage people and what effect that has. And we're certainly seeing a lot of innovation in that area. I think the UK is well ahead of the States in this respect, and certainly some of my European colleagues are picking up on the way that the UK call centres are really going out of their way to treat people properly, to put great services in place for them, and to make sure that the workplace is somewhere they want to be. Most of all, though, that comes back to coaching and team leaders, and the people you work for have to have a really open attitude to learning from customers, learning from their frontline staff. When you get that working, the shift in impetus is just incredible.
And Sharon's sent through a tip. Actually listen to what your customer's saying in their own words. So I guess that's dealing with verbatim comments. I've always found that very, very powerful when you say, Mrs. Jones has said this. And sometimes that can articulate the whole problem.
Right. And if you have a call recording, you can get tonality as well.
Yes, and that can be very powerful to play at board meetings.
I think, Jonty, one of the points about that is using unstructured data like that, just verbatims and so forth. The customer gets to say what they want. So many people now, so many companies are giving people, score me on this, rate me on the other, and so on and so forth. And quite often I find that I've got more customer effort in handling the follow-up and the feedback than I've got in the transaction I had in the first. And so I think there's a real need to think hard about what you're doing with the data if you're going to ask the customer a question. What's really important when you do this properly is if you ask the customer a question and they score you badly, you need to pick the phone up and talk to them. So don't ask more customers than you can pick the phone up to, because otherwise you just make the experience worse. You rub it in, if you know what I mean.
So we've got a couple of questions in, I believe. Customers are now preferring to talk to an agent at the contact centre rather than an IVR, as there's multiple options, and it sometimes confuses the customer. In such a call centre scenario, how will an IVR message help?
Can I take that one, Jonty?
Yes, indeed.
I think the issue is that the IVR is not set up to work. There's a whole psychology around how you set IVRs up, both in the use of language and levels. But typically, you don't want more than 3 options in any level, and you don't want more than 2 options. If you start, 2 levels. So if you start putting, 4 levels in and 6 offers on each one, and using language which confuses, you're bound to be in trouble. What I've always found is that IVRs that are done well are hardly noticeable and extremely successful. And it's about going back to some of the basic psychology of the language you use on the IVR. There's no shortcut for that. You have to really, really work at that and test it and make it work properly.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick point on that as well. I think in terms of what I was talking about in terms of personalisation, we're trying with our customers to head to IVR-less environments. So recognising and matching the caller's requirements ahead of time and routing the call based on what we already know means that you can sometimes do without IVRs at all.
Indeed.